Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, May the 5th, 2025. On the thumbnail of this video, I have got a picture of a hawthorn bush. And the hawthorn is a plant that is associated with the month of May. And it is also associated with the festival of Beltane. And Beltane is a Celtic festival that takes place or took place on May the 1st. Of course, it's now May the 5th. And Beltane, I think traditionally in Ireland, is regarded as a quarter day. But from an English perspective or a more modern perspective, it's a cross-quarter day. So you could say you've got Lady Day, I think, is on March the 25th, and you've got Midsummer Day on June the 24th, and these are these quarter days, and then you've got the cross-quarter day in the middle, hence Beltane. But what does this mean astrologically? So from an astrological point of view, the key points are the solstice and the equinox. So we had the equinox around March the 20th, March the 21st. And we've got a solstice next month, the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, around June the 21st. Now, there is a point that is actually halfway between the equinox and the solstice. And that is the point when the sun is exactly at 15 degrees Taurus, because at the equinox, sun is at 0 degrees Aries. Solstice, it's at 0 degrees Cancer. So halfway between the two is 15 degrees Taurus. And you could say that that is a special moment. But that moment does not actually coincide with the cross-quarter day. And so you might say with Beltane, which is this festival that I think is celebrated on May the 1st, if you treat it in an astrological sense, then you should say, well, it should be when the sun is at 15 degrees Taurus. Of course, I'm not trying to say that the Celtic tradition is wrong. I'm certainly not going to do that. That would be an outrageous thing to do. I'm just saying one can look at things in a different approach. One can look at things in a different approach, and if one wants to be astrological about it, one sort of looks at numbers, and probably one is being too logical about it. But you could say that point, 15 degrees Taurus, matters. And today, the sun is on 15 degrees Taurus, at 15 degrees Taurus. In fact, there is a precise moment when it is at 15 degrees Taurus, when measured across the ecliptic, across the zodiac, when the sun is halfway between 0 degrees Aries and 0 degrees Cancer. And I would argue that it's a moment of special significance. And we should be looking at that precise moment. And that is what I want to do at the end of this video. But first of all, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, May the 5th, 2025. So here is the chart for today, and set for noon New York. And so you can see that the moon is at 26 Leo in New York time. So that means it's one of those annoying days when the moon is in neither one sign nor the other. You can't say, oh, this is a moon in Leo day, this is a moon in Virgo day. Certainly from a New York perspective, it's very much half and half. And okay, if you're in California or Oregon or British Columbia, then I think the moon moves into Leo. I think I get it at sort of 12:40 p.m., sort of around lunchtime, and it would be 12:40, so it would be 3:40 in in New York. So in fact, for most of the day, certainly the early part of the day, the moon is moving through Leo. And if you're in the UK, then the moon doesn't move into Virgo until 20 to 9 in the evening. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it doesn't move into Virgo until tomorrow morning. So there's a bit of a contrast there today. So it's difficult to make generalizations. Even across America, West Coast and East Coast. Is it going to be West Coast around lunchtime? If you're East Coast, nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's for most of the day the moon is in Leo. So it does make things a little bit complicated there. And the moon. Late Leo, moon is quite close to Regulus, where regardless of whether the moon is in a Leo or Virgo, you can say that it's, the moon is close to Regulus, it's close to the royal star. And so perhaps if we want to get attention or if we want to get in touch with important people, now might be the day to do it. Now the moon, as it moves through late Leo, it does make sextiles to Mercury and Jupiter. And that is because Mercury and Jupiter are actually in sextile themselves. So if you look at let me rephrase that. The moon makes a trine to Mercury and it makes a sextile to Jupiter. Let me get that right. So there is Jupiter at 22 Gemini, Mercury at 22 Aries, so they're in sextile aspect, and the moon late Leo makes the trine to Mercury and the sextile to Jupiter. So it's a Mercury sextile Jupiter day, and Mercury sextile Jupiter is a nice aspect. It certainly knows how to express itself, and it's a sextile, so there isn't the kind of crazy pressure you might have with a square, and so we can assert ourselves verbally, and we can articulate our optimism if we are optimistic. And there's no reason why many of us shouldn't be optimistic with Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter. Mercury is the way we think, and so if it's sextile to Jupiter, that's going to sort of lighten things up. And so I'm, quite optimistic about that Mercury sextile Jupiter. It is positive. We're starting to see things in a new way. I know things are difficult in the world, and I'm not saying things are going to get any better. I think from an international perspective, there are numerous trouble spots, aren't there? Which I'll actually be talking about when I talk about the astrological Beltane, with the sun halfway between the equinox and the solstice. And in fact, if you look at the sun, see the sun at noon New York time is at 15 degrees 24 Taurus, only 24 minutes past 15, past that 15 degrees Taurus, 15 degrees Taurus. The sun is, making a semi-square to the Aries point. So it is a point of power. Okay, it may not be the point of power that the solstice or the equinox is, but it's still something we really do need to consider. And I as I will be demonstrating, later in the video, we need to really take a careful look at what the sun is doing. And let's now look at the chart for Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia and Eastern Asia. So noon Sydney on Monday, May the 5th, the moon is at 20 degrees Leo, so it's much earlier in the sign than it was in New York. And it's going to be in Leo, of course, all day long. And probably the main aspect that the moon is making in Sydney, Australia is maybe a moon trine Mercury, perhaps a bit later in the day, moon square Uranus. But I think that it's a day in Australia where things should be okay with that moon trine Mercury, and so And of course, it's also making that sextile to Jupiter. In fact, I would have said that the moon trine Mercury and the moon sextile Jupiter, which I was talking about when looking at the sort of New York chart, is probably going to be stronger. So it may well be in Australia and New Zealand that it's actually going to be a somewhat better day. Not because it's less difficult, but maybe it's more fortunate. It's easier to take advantage of everything in the middle of the day. And if you're in the Americas or in Europe, you might have to try a little harder. So yeah, if you are in Australasia, then things do look good, all things being equal. And then there is the heliocentric picture, looking at things from the viewpoint of the sun at the center of the solar system, and the sun. Well, from the sun's perspective, the Earth is getting close to that sextile of Mars. The Earth is now less than a degree away from that sextile. So I think that sextile is an important sign for the day. And Earth sextile Mars is about action, being active. If we want to do something, we probably can. And of course, geocentrically, we're helped by the fact that Mercury is going to be sextile Jupiter. Additionally, Mercury is sextile Venus. So we've got two sextiles heliocentrically. So, I think for many of us, it could be quite a good day if we can take advantage of the energy that is all around us that we can see in the heliocentric chart. So let me now move on to my forecasts for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, May the 5th, 2025. Aries, it feels actually that things are pretty good, though don't be complacent. If you want to get things done, make an impression, then start the day early. Especially if you're in the Americas. If you leave things too long and you sort of wait until the afternoon to get anything done, well, you might have missed your chance. So Aries, don't feel that you're dealing with an opportunity that is going to last forever. And if you're meaning to do something and you're meaning to do something important, get it out of the way. Make sure that you don't allow time to just slip away. But in general, you're someone at the moment who has a strong sense of purpose, and I do think that you're going to be luckier than average, especially if you trust yourself. It's down to you to make things happen. If you put yourself in a position where you're dependent on another person, then things might not be so good. You might get fine, but things get slowed down, and your various contacts, you may know a lot of people, but the question is, can they come up with the goods? And I think there is a real chance that maybe they can't, but that shouldn't worry you, because I think on your own you have got sufficient power to actually make things happen. And so do take advantage of this opportunity. And also, it does seem that although other people are a bit sluggish, they are prepared to listen. So you have got things to say, and you can speak with great conviction, and people will like what you have to say. They may not actually act on what you say, but they'll get a good impression of you. And so that might be enough. And perhaps what you're doing in terms of your verbal output, it could be the written word, could be the spoken word, is that you're laying the foundations for the future. You can't expect anything to happen today on an interpersonal level, because things just aren't quite good enough. But on your own, If you're not reliant on anyone except yourself, then Aries, I am really confident that things can really move. And additionally, from a heliocentric perspective, we have got the Earth sextile Mars, and that sextile you'll have it tomorrow as well on Tuesday. But Earth sextile Mars means that the world is not going to resist. Okay, it might not help you, or at least other people might not help, but they're not going to get in your way. So if you decide that something has to happen today, then I'm really confident that you can actually make it happen. And it may be that you're the kind of person that is needed. While other people are distracted, you're the one that can be working away and can be actually getting things done. And so, Aries, whatever it is that you want to achieve today, I think there's a really good chance that you actually can achieve it. Taurus. Taurus, good fortune, bad fortune. It can work in different ways, and it can work in strange and perverse ways. And just because something is bad doesn't mean that it can't be good. And there seems to be a certain tendency today, or at least a possibility, Taurus, that you may be able to take advantage of someone else's misfortune or something going wrong for another person, and somehow it works to your advantage. I don't know how you feel about that. And it's not that you are wrong or evil or culpable. It just means that you are there. And very often there are people who they make it their business to take advantage of other people's misfortune. If you're a plumber, or even if you're unfortunately if you're a doctor specializing in cancer, if no one had cancer, you'd be out of business, wouldn't you? And so things happen today that on the surface you might feel are, not that just doesn't seem pleasant, and your first instinct may be to be disturbed by it. But if you actually look at what's going on, then somehow, you can take advantage of a situation. And it could be about building up credit for yourself. So if someone has got problems, needs help, you give help, and it is remembered, and you're creating credit for the future. So don't shy away from bad events, but don't revel in them. I mean, there is a small fringe of Taurians who may actually do this. It may be a question of schadenfreude, rejoicing in another person's misfortune. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to be you, but there could be a few Taurians who privately are quite delighted when someone has a problem, has a misfortune. I mean, why? Well, it could be human nature. And also, Taurus can be quite a vengeful sign. Of all the 12 signs, you could argue that Taurus is one of the most vengeful. I don't know what the other possibilities are. You could argue maybe Cancer, because Cancer sort of holds on to things. So resist that temptation, if you possibly can. And on a more sort of practical note, you are fairly down to earth at the moment, and you know what's important, and you're able to talk about things in a very sensible way. And as a result, I think that people are going to trust you. And if things are a little bit confusing, no one knows what's going on, you're the person that can really, bring things down to earth, and people will appreciate that approach. Now, later in the day, the moon does move into Virgo. Now that would be this evening if you're in Europe. It would be this afternoon if you're in the Americas. And so the moon moving into Virgo does bring a little bit of a change. I think it possibly gives you a little more freedom. You find that there's less things or fewer things requiring your attention, and you perhaps have a chance to think about things, in terms of yourself and your own needs, rather than worrying, what other people are doing and whether people are disturbing you and whether you need to do something to help another person or whatever. So Moon in Virgo could actually be calming, but it also might remind you of what you can do for yourself, not for anyone else. Gemini. For most of the day, the moon is moving through a Leo, and with the moon moving through Leo, it's making sextiles to it's making a sextile to Jupiter. It's also making a trine to Mercury, and so with moon moving through Leo, I would have said that you're able to express yourself very well, and you feel good about what you're saying, and you appreciate other people's feedback, and you may actually get some praise. You may be a time when you actually can feel good about yourself, and so there's no need for false modesty. But these aspects to Mercury and Jupiter, they are important because they're picking up on what's going on anyway today. Because today, the main aspect is arguably Mercury sextile Jupiter. So Mercury is your ruler, and it's sextile Jupiter in Gemini. This aspect between Mercury and Jupiter, really is good. It makes you feel good about yourself, and you should be aware of what is possible, and you don't have to have things that are holding you back. Yeah, you might temporarily think, oh, there's something you can't do. But if you actually think about it, nothing can stop you. And so if there's something you want to explore, something you want to say, then that sextile between Mercury and Jupiter is really going to be helpful, and it might be an aspect that could be very useful in your social life. So if you are socializing today, if there are social opportunities, I think that in certainly in the UK it's a holiday. I think so. Holidays are often times to be sociable, aren't they? But Mercury sextile Jupiter is going to help. Mercury sextile Jupiter is additionally an aspect that is connected with relationships, because Mercury is your ruler. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, your opposite sign. So when Mercury and Jupiter are sextile, it's like you and another person are on the same wavelength. You're not exactly on the same wavelength, because you are different. It's not like you're at a unity. It's not like that. But there's this great way in which Mercury in Aries complements Jupiter in Gemini. It's about action and thought coming together, and so that can represent a relationship which is dynamic and which is also well balanced. So with relationships, give it your best shot with Mercury sextile Jupiter, because there are plenty of things that you and another person can do and can cooperate on, and so from a relationship perspective, today, Monday, really could be really very good. Now, at the end of the day, well, it kind of depends where you are, but the moon does eventually move into Virgo. When does it move into Virgo? Well, it moves into Virgo sort of early afternoon, lunchtime if you're in California. It moves into Virgo, well, tomorrow, well into tomorrow if you're in Sydney, Australia. But so whenever the moon does move into Virgo, that could slow things down a little. So you have all this action, you can do lots of things, you can do it quickly, and you can be successful, but there'll come a moment when hopefully you've done whatever it is you have to do, and then you can just relax. Cancer. Cancer, you are, or can be, quite active today. You can be sociable in your own way, and if you've got something you want to say that's important, then I think there's every chance that people are going to really listen to you. And so don't hold back, Cancer, and don't be worried about talking about things that you regard as being important. You're slightly concerned that they might be rather trivial, rather mundane. You don't want to bother people now. They've got other things to think about, other things to worry about. But if something has to be said, Cancer, then now might be your chance, and people will listen, and they'll understand also that you have their best interests at heart. And so, Cancer, I don't know what your plans are today, but if you're doing anything of a practical nature or that's perhaps has a material dimension, then you're going to be very with it, and you're going to absolutely understand what needs to be done and what needs to be said, and you may well be appreciated. Not everyone is in the mood for taking the initiative. They've got other things to do. They've got other things to worry about. Perhaps they're being a bit cautious, but not you, Cancer. I think Cancer, you are very much in control, but also you have an enthusiasm to you. You're not always enthusiastic, but if you think about it, things aren't so bad, and if you can transmit this enthusiasm, I think that you will be well served, and people will really appreciate it. And so you are very much in balance, in harmony with everything. Now, the moon is quite close to the fixed star Regulus. Now, it is on Regulus every month, so it's not an unusual event, the moon crossing Regulus, but why not take advantage of it? So if there is someone you're trying to get in touch with who you might regard as being important, who's someone who has authority, then now might be a good time to do it. Even if you are a bit wary of it, you might feel that they're at too high a level for you. You shouldn't be bothering them. But there's a moment for everything. So if there is someone who you really want to get in touch with, but are afraid of getting in touch with because you feel embarrassed, you're not quite sure about what the response is going to be, now might be a good time to do it. Maybe to make a phone call, or to send an email or text message. So do consider that possibility, and don't doubt yourself, because good luck is on your side. You are lucky. Moon is sextile Jupiter. Moon is trine Mercury. So the words come together. You know how to handle yourself, and additionally, Mercury is sextile Jupiter. That's a great aspect. Mercury sextile Jupiter, and you perhaps can think about ways to get your message across in ways that might be slightly unorthodox. They may not be direct, but in the end, people will understand you, and I do think that they will appreciate your message. Leo. Leo, the sun is at 15 degrees Taurus. And, 15 degrees Taurus, you could argue, is a point of power. And that is because at 15 degrees Taurus, the sun is halfway between the equinox and the solstice. It is exactly halfway. And with the sun at 15 degrees Taurus, I think that you're in a position, where you are really able to have an impact. People are not going to ignore you, and it's going to be obvious that you've got something to contribute. And the sun at 15 degrees Taurus, remember, it is 45 degrees from the Aries point. The Aries point represents the world, and you are a person of the world, and you can interact with the world. And so, don't waste today's opportunities. You're perhaps stronger than you realize. And, also that the moon is continuing to move through Leo. If you're in the Americas, well, the moon is going to be out of Leo potentially as early, if you're in California, it'll be out of Leo around lunchtime. So if you are in California, then, get going. Don't wait. If you're in other parts of the world, you're going to have more time to enjoy the moon moving through Leo. And, while the moon moves through Leo, it makes a trine to Mercury, it makes a sextile to Jupiter. And in fact, the moon is conjunct Regulus, which is the royal star. Now, the royal star is actually technically in Virgo, so even when the moon moves out of Leo, it's still on Regulus. And so this is a time, Leo, when you can really do stuff that is important, that is meaningful, and you shouldn't be afraid of anyone. And I'm talking about people who have authority and power. You can interact with them, and if you have authority and power yourself, then I think that you're going to be able to very much use this power, and really people are going to listen to you, and you have something to say which is of universal and global significance. I mean, that sounds a little bit of an exaggeration, but as far as is possible, given the possibilities of your life, you can do things of global significance, and you do things which are relevant to everyone. So Leo, it looks like being a powerful day when a lot of things can come together, and it's important that you're not shy, and that you really are able to express the full power of your personality. Now, as far as the specific area of one-to-one relationships, as far as that is concerned, that may be the one area of your life that may not work too well. And it may just be that you're not really in the mood for dealing with just one other person in a one-to-one way. You may not have the sympathy, or you may feel that they don't have the sympathy. So if you want to make the most of the day's opportunities, then close relationships, even close partnerships, whatever that partnership might be about, should possibly be avoided. Because as soon as things get emotional, or there's an emotional dimension to what's going on, then it's probably not going to work. And what that means is that you would be misdirecting your talents, or you're on ground where you're not strong, and that would be unfortunate, because you are so strong, when you are on your own territory, doing things your own way. But if you stray into emotional territory, then it's not going to work, and I think that would be a waste. Virgo, there is a great aspect at the moment between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury is your ruling planet. It's sextile Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet of good fortune. So that's easy, isn't it? It indicates that today you can be fortunate and things can work your way. And if you make the effort and you take advantage of everything that the universe offers, then I think that you can be actually very happy with the results. Now, I don't want to encourage you to just hang around waiting for something to happen. And it doesn't usually work like that. And with Mercury sextile Jupiter, you have to use your own inner power and not underestimate yourself. And there may be things about yourself that you are a little bit wary of. You're afraid. What would happen if you were to reveal the true Virgo? Would that be a good thing? And you might think, well, it might be better to just keep quiet about it. Well, I don't think it would be better to keep quiet about it. I think that there is room for a little bit of bravery, for taking a risk. I mean, what is the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can happen is you can make a fool of yourself. But, the best that can happen is that you can really engage the power of who you are and, make things happen. Because this Mercury sextile Jupiter, it is a great aspect. And it's supported by the moon. The moon is making a trine to... What's the moon doing? Moon's making a trine to Mercury. Moon's making a sextile to Jupiter. And again, that moon in Leo represents some hidden force, a hidden power, something you're used to keeping secret. But if you can reveal it, then, things start to happen. And what you can do, perhaps what you should do, is, get the balance right between being very enthusiastic, optimistic, and very determined, but also being cautious and structured. Now, cautious doesn't mean not doing stuff. You've got to do something. You've got to bring something out into the open. Cautious means just knowing that you've got to take things one step at a time and structuring yourself and knowing that there's no room for sloppiness. Because, with Mercury sextile Jupiter, it's a great aspect, but it can be sloppy. It can see an advantage and it can lose an advantage, because that can be the nature of Jupiter, because Jupiter is a planet that at times can be complacent. Or it's not Jupiter being complacent, that is people who are potentially in a position to benefit from Jupiter could be complacent, and you don't want to be complacent. And so if you can combine a positive approach with being hardworking and disciplined and structured and not taking for granted and not taking anything for granted, then what can stop you? Additionally, with this Mercury sextile Jupiter, it's a great aspect for relationships. So relationships can be a source of great satisfaction, and also you should be open-minded about who you can get on with. You can get on with all sorts of people, and don't think that someone is too exalted for you. Of course, I'm talking about relationships of all kinds. I'm not restricting to any one type. Relationships often have a purpose, and someone who you don't feel you have any connection with, in the first instance, perhaps you feel that they're moving in exalted circles and they've got no time for you. You don't want to limit yourself. You can get on with everyone, and you may find that you and someone else who, you thought you didn't have much in common, you actually have things in common, and you can, at the very least, work in a way which is mutually beneficial. So, overall, Virgo, I think that today can be really good. And at the end of the day, well, it depends on your time zone, the moon actually moves into your sign. So if you're in London, for example, or the UK, then the moon will move into Virgo at 20 to 9 in the evening. And if you're in California, it'll be at sort of around lunchtime. So when the moon moves into Virgo, you can really see things through. The moon is in your sign, and so you're feeling even better, and you can be more open. Maybe there were things you were keeping to yourself, or you felt it wasn't the right time, but now the moon is moving into Virgo. You can really be yourself, and that could actually make you even more fortunate. Libra, you at the moment are, I think, enjoying other people's company, or at least you can enjoy other people's company, and also you're starting to have a good sense of what you could do in the future. It's always good to think about the future and to sort of make plans for the future. And so, the future could go in many different ways. And, to an extent, it will be up to you how it works out. So, be open-minded and, consider the possibility, consider every possibility. And, don't feel that you are tied to any particular experience, and that may say something about, for example, how you're looking at the summer. What are you doing over the summer? This is, we've just had Beltane, the Celtic festival of Beltane. There is a view that Beltane is the beginning of summer, and so, well, at least from a northern hemisphere perspective. Sorry if you're in Australasia, for example, or South Africa, but it's a time when you can think about what you want to do, and you shouldn't be necessarily tied to any particular course of action. But while you're going about the day, do pay attention to what other people are experiencing, and not everyone is feeling great. Some people may be feeling sorry for themselves, and they might have had some temporary misfortune. And in this case, there are things you can do to help. And if there is any uncertainty or any sense that people are worried, then you can actually do something about it. You are there. And so Libra, you do have the opportunity to make a positive contribution. And, don't panic if you suddenly find yourself in a situation which is apparently not to your liking, because in the end, things can work in your favor. So it's possible that a bad situation turns into a good situation, and perhaps a bad situation is a situation that you are actually able to take advantage of. So do look at what is happening, and don't feel guilty about taking advantage of a bad situation. Sometimes it just has to be done. It's not like you win, someone else loses. It just may be that you're there, and because you're there at a particular time, you can somehow gain from it. And so that's an extra dimension to what is happening today. And the main aspect of the day is a sextile aspect between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury in Aries is making a sextile to Jupiter, and so I would see that aspect as being more about other people. There is a social dimension today, as I've just said, and with this social dimension, it's a reminder that you can benefit from other people. in many different ways. And at the very least, you can benefit in terms of ideas. You can get ideas from what people are saying, even if they're saying nothing. You look at their actions, you look at what they're doing, and something occurs to you, and you may see another person as being an example. They're doing something you would like to do, and there's no need to feel jealous of them. You can actually find a way of doing it yourself. So observe other people, observe what they're doing, and in that way you could learn something very important. Scorpio, it's a Monday, start of a new week, and it's a Monday where you're going to want to actually make things happen, and you will have, I think, a belief that you are powerful, and you're not really going to just want to just hang around and do nothing. So even if it's a bank holiday, I think is it a bank holiday in the UK? Even if it's a bank holiday and you're in the UK, that doesn't mean you should be doing nothing. There are, I think, Scorpio, things that you absolutely, definitely want to be doing. So, do make sure that you get going on them. Whatever they are, whatever is important to you, and you most certainly can have an impact, quite a powerful impact. But it is down to you. It's important that you don't let other people's actions, or in fact more likely non-actions, get you down. You are dynamic. A lot of people are not dynamic. They have got their own worries, they've got their own concerns, they don't want to make a move. Maybe they're just enjoying the sun. It's not your problem, and it doesn't make any difference. You are the one who can make things happen. And in fact, you could argue that if no one is in your way, if other people are distracted, well, so much the better. It just means that you can just get on with things. And so, Scorpio, decide what you need to do, and then just go ahead and do it, and that will be fine. Now, the sun is in Taurus, your opposite sign. Of course, the sun has been in your opposite sign for a couple of weeks. In fact, the sun is halfway through Taurus, exactly halfway through Taurus. It's at 15 degrees of the sign. And with the sun at this halfway point, that may say something about some of the people in your life, maybe just one person in your life, because the Taurus opposite sign, that says something about relationships. And it's possible that there is one person who in a way is very connected, and they may not be especially forthcoming. They may be holding something back, but you kind of know that they've got something to offer, that there's something they can do for you. And so this requires some thought. And just because someone is being difficult and is being intransigent, doesn't mean that they can't be useful. And maybe Scorpio, you can find a way of getting round the situation. Maybe there is a way of getting through, and it just requires you to be clever and well organized, right choice of words. And so don't make absolutely final assumptions about other people. Just because people are behaving in a way you find irritating, and if they're holding something back, they could be useful if they tried. You feel, but they're just being really stubborn. You're a Scorpio. You're very intuitive and sensitive, and you know what makes people tick, and you can be manipulative. So perhaps with the right actions, the right choice of words, you really can get someone to start cooperating, even if that's not what this person intended. So perhaps the real challenge today, Scorpio, is dealing with other people and getting them to show something, though it's not a challenge that you necessarily have to be obsessed about, because as I said at the beginning, you can do a great deal on your own. And it is a day when I do believe that you're going to be quite ambitious. Whatever that ambition means, it depends on your situation, and you really can get results. And the sooner you get going on it, the better. Don't leave it too late. If you're in California, by lunchtime you might have lost your chance. So be aware that there could be a little bit of time pressure. Sagittarius, for most of the day, the moon is moving through Leo, and of course Leo is a fire sign, and from a Sagittarian perspective, that's great. It's always good to have planets in fire signs, and you are aware of what is possible, and you don't have to restrict yourself to anything. That is important. There's perhaps been a little bit too much restriction in the past, and now is a time to really look around you and see what's available, and don't be lazy about it. Just because something is available now doesn't mean it's going to be available in 5 minutes' time. So if an opportunity comes up, take advantage of it. Don't hang around. Don't spend too much time thinking about it. But you probably won't. I mean, you're a Sagittarius. You're a fire sign. You understand the importance of fast action. And it's not just that the moon is in Sagittarius. The moon is making a sextile to Jupiter. Jupiter's your ruler. So moon sextile Jupiter allows you to really benefit from whatever is happening around you, not just in the material world, in the cosmos. Lots of energy is flying around, and you can pick up on this energy, and it may even feel that you have been chosen for some kind of purpose. It may not be a lifelong purpose. It may be some purpose that you need to do now in the next 5 minutes. So we should never regard destiny as being something that lasts forever. Destiny, we can have a destiny for 1 second. In 1 second, this is my destiny. In the next second, I have a different destiny. So we shouldn't get too focused on long periods of time. So always be aware, Sagittarius, about what you should be doing, what you can be doing at a particular time. And the moon is also making a trine to Mercury, and I think with this moon trine Mercury, you're going to be quite good at explaining who you are and what you're doing and why what you're doing is valuable. And so if you're trying to get support for whatever reason, then I'm confident that you can get that support, because your explanations will sound very convincing. And it won't just be about the facts, it will be about the presentation. And additionally, Mercury is making a sextile to Jupiter. So Mercury sextile Jupiter, that is a great aspect. And it really does allow you to give a good account of yourself. And additionally, Mercury sextile Jupiter, if we take classic astrology, or at least classic 12-sign astrology for Sagittarius, you'd have to say that Mercury sextile Jupiter would be a great aspect for relationships. I don't like to be too positive in the area of relationships, because if you've watched my videos for long enough, you'll know that I'm slightly skeptical about the value of astrology, when it comes to relationships. Astrology can create unreal expectations, but just looking at it at face value, Mercury sextile Jupiter does indicate fortunate relationships, benefiting from other people. It is associated with love and romance, connections, and also, Mercury is in the 5th house from Sagittarius, and of course, in astrology, but at least fairly modern astrology, the 5th house is often connected with romance. Maybe it's connected too much with romance, but that is a way you can look at this Mercury sextile Jupiter. And if you look at some random column for today, you look up Sagittarius, you will probably find that this column is sort of emphasizing romance and love and relationships because of that Mercury sextile Jupiter. And so I just have to convey that. Whether or not that is realistic, I don't know. We don't want to exaggerate, but I don't at the same time want to miss out on what is a really good aspect, which is a good aspect for relationships. It's not just about romance, it's about getting on with people, and you can get on with people very well and on your terms, and that's perhaps what really matters. Capricorn, it is a split day, because the moon starts a day in Leo and it ends a day in Virgo. And if you are in California, then lunchtime, I think 12:40 p.m., sort of 20 minutes to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the moon does move into Virgo. That would be 3:40 p.m. if you're in New York. So that is an important change, and the moon moving into Virgo is really something that you should be welcoming. I think that with the moon moving into Virgo, you're going to feel a little more optimistic, and you won't be quite so brooding, and you're going to be sort of more open to sort of new possibilities. So that is potentially something to look forward to. But for most of the day, the moon is in Leo, and with the moon in Leo, you do have a fairly serious approach. You know that there are things out there that just can't be trivialized, and you certainly can't take things at face value, because if you take things at face value, you could end up being disappointed and even tricked. And so you have to question people's motivations. There is no choice. But questioning people's motivations doesn't always mean that you come to a conclusion that someone is up to no good. It could work the opposite way. A person who seems to be up to no good, their intentions might be completely honest. And so Capricorn, you have an opportunity to uncover the truth, and you're not going to be negative just for the sake of it. In fact, Capricorn, you're capable of being very positive and being open to the possibility that things are going to work really well. You're open to that possibility in that Capricorn kind of way. You know that things could go wrong. You know that you might be disappointed, but you can still be open to the possibility that things really are going to work. And so there's no reason why you should just stop things happening because you're negative. I don't think we're going to see self-fulfilling prophecies in a negative sense today, because you can be open-minded. And additionally, Capricorn, today you are going to be well organized and well prepared. And I don't mean that in a boring sense. I know when you hear about organization and preparation, that all sounds a bit tedious, but you can sort yourself out with enthusiasm, even with gusto, and you can have everything in the right place, and you can just be ready for whatever comes up, for whatever the universe brings. And the universe will bring a few different things. Some of them might be not especially desirable, but the main thing the universe brings will be something that you can take advantage of. And especially, once the moon moves into Virgo, when the moon moves into Virgo, you start to see possibilities, and you can be open-minded, and you can start to experience things that you maybe haven't allowed yourself to experience over the last few days. And so, to my mind, all of this looks pretty positive. You are a sensible Capricorn, but also you're a Capricorn that is ready for anything, and you're someone who can be very much part of it all. And because you're part of it all, you can benefit from the overall situation. Aquarius, things may be easing a little bit. So over the weekend, there was a semi-square between the Sun and Saturn. Also, Moon was conjunct Mars. And I did think that these two aspects could be problematic. Sun might indicate other people, and Saturn is, of course, you, because Saturn rules Aquarius. So that Sun semi-square Saturn could have meant that other people weren't necessarily behaving in a way you particularly appreciated. Also, with Moon and Mars in Leo, the interpersonal dimension is something that can't necessarily be ignored. But the Sun and Saturn are now starting to separate from one another. So I would have said that today, Monday, you may feel that certain complications are starting to ease. Of course, I don't want to create complications or suggest complications where none exist. Very often when I do these 12 signs, I talk about things which do not apply to the people I'm supposedly talking to, and I do get sort of comments saying that did not apply to me. That was a joke. So it does happen. I certainly don't claim to be right all the time. So I just I try my hardest. But overall, I think that the Sun moving away from that semi square to Saturn should be making things easier. You can see here, the Sun is at 15 degrees Taurus. It was making the exact semi-square to Saturn at 28, sorry, at 13 Taurus. So it's a couple of degrees off. So I do think that things are getting easier, and perhaps you can be more appreciative of the outside world. Things from the outside may not have always felt especially supportive or favorable, but now, Aquarius, you can have, I think, a more positive approach. In fact, you can actually have a very positive approach if you try. So if you try to be happy, if you try to see the best in things, then I think that you can actually create a positive feedback loop, and you look for a bit of positive, and you see that positive, and that feeds into something else, and you feel better and better, and then you can actually start to radiate a certain positivity. I mean, not a careless, mindless positivity, but a positivity that is constructive. And so that might have some connection with you and other people. People pick up on who you are, and if you're very definite about yourself, then they appreciate that. So don't give up on anyone. And perhaps a person who wasn't behaving right, or you just didn't feel any sympathy for a few days ago, maybe the situation is improving. So, nothing is cast in stone, and you've just got to see what is possible. And the moon is making it's making a sextile to Jupiter, it's making a trine to Mercury, and those aspects should just facilitate flow, facilitate communications. And in fact, we've got a sextile between Mercury and Jupiter, and so with this sextile between Mercury and Jupiter, it's perhaps not a time to be shy. There may be things that you want to explain and talk about and even get excited about, and perhaps, Aquarius, you didn't feel you had an opportunity in the past, or even the recent past. But now, things are changing. And so if you talk about and discuss what is exciting to you, then I think that there is a good chance that you will get really some excellent feedback. And, additionally, there is information coming your way. You're starting to understand things. And the moon does move into Virgo at the end of the day. Okay, it could be into tomorrow if you're in Australia and New Zealand. When the moon moves into Virgo, that creates a further change. It allows you to create a bit of distance between yourself and the world, but it also gives you a chance to get some perspective. And this perspective is not just sort of a mental perspective. Your emotions are engaged there as well. And so as you move through Monday, Tuesday, perhaps Wednesday, you have a chance to think things through and to work out what it's all about. And it's not a time to be necessarily reaching firm conclusions, in a good way or a bad way. And so that feeling of that sense of balancing yourself could start to occur once the moon moves into Virgo, whether it's today or tomorrow. Pisces, we have got a fantastic aspect between Mercury and Jupiter, and this aspect is definitely relevant to you, because Jupiter's ruler of Pisces, and it receives a fortunate aspect from Mercury, and so your mind is on good form, and you know what's important, and you're not going to waste time thinking about things that are trivial. And so your mind can be thinking about many different things, and you shouldn't ignore things connected with money. If you do pay attention to a financial subject, whatever it is, then I think actually you'll get to grips with it pretty quickly, quicker than expected. And it's possible that you can actually look at a situation that, to begin with, you think really is not good. It seems a bit grim. But, when you really turn it over, you can start to see the opportunities and start to see the possibilities. And perhaps what started off being a little bit frightening may actually be reassuring. So if you have an opportunity to think about money, to look at something of a financial nature, then do take that opportunity. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of, and I think that Mercury sextile Jupiter, is really going to help. And also, the Moon is making a trine to Mercury. It's also making a sextile to Jupiter, and that makes you very well organized. Everything is nicely structured. I mean, one doesn't normally associate Pisces with structure, though Saturn is moving through your sign. It's still moving through your sign, getting quite close to Aries now. It's at the end of the month, but Saturn moves into Aries, so there is that change coming very soon. But for the moment, Pisces, I do think that you are quite well organized, and you know what's important, and if you have a chance to deal with things of a practical nature, then do go ahead. Don't be afraid, and you might actually enjoy it once you really get going. Once you get your teeth into something really practical, something that has got real meaning and use. And additionally, Mercury sextile Jupiter can say something about relationships, because Jupiter is ruler of Pisces, Mercury is ruler of Virgo, your opposite sign. And so with Mercury sextile Jupiter, that might mean that some of the relationships in your life might actually work quite well. How would they work quite well? I think they might work quite well if you just look at what's important. It's not necessarily about having fun with another person. It's not like that. It's more thinking about a relationship and asking yourself, well, what is the purpose of this relationship? What is the fundamentals of this relationship? And what keeps it together? And Mercury sextile Jupiter can actually focus on the key stress points, in fact, because the things that keep it together, if they're unraveling, well, then you've got the potential of a breaking relationship. But that's not what has to be, because you are able to concentrate on what's important. One thing that's important in certain relationships can be money. I mean, money is, it seems absurd that money should be a key part of relationships, but it often is. Although some relationships are based on money. They're about two people working out how they can benefit from working together, or even benefit from each other. So don't shy away from the important points when looking at relationships, because you can deal with them, and I think you can deal with them in a way that is favorable for everyone. And those are my forecasts of the 12 signs. And now I want to look at Monday from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? Just a reminder, this sounds really boring, doesn't it? The way I always say this in every single video, I go through this. What is Monday going to be like? Whatever. The reason I do this is because I do believe that with the I Ching, in fact with any oracle, you need to write out your question. If you're asking a question, you need to write it out, not just think it. You need to write it out, because that way you've got focus. You know what you're asking about. And so it also means that if some irrelevant things come to mind which have nothing to do with your question, you can ignore them. You have to think about what you've written down. So that's why it is something that I do think it's important, even though it might seem rather boring. So I asked this question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 32, duration. Now it sounds like perhaps a rather boring hexagram, duration. We just have to keep going with something. But we have got 5 moving lines. 5. I mean, that's a lot. And, the average is 1 moving line, perhaps 2 or 0 moving lines, but 5 moving lines, regardless of what duration means. With 5 moving lines, that indicates that today there is a lot of action. Things are changing. Things are moving from one thing to another. One moment things might be positive, the next moment things might be negative. There is a process that has to be gone through, and it's important that one understands that process. And of course I will try my best to explain what this movement is about. So duration, as a general principle, is about seeing something through. And it's kind of interesting that we've got this hexagram when the sun is at 15 degrees Taurus. You could argue that 15 degrees Taurus is the most fixed place for the sun to be. I mean, Taurus is a fixed sign. You could say that Taurus is the most fixed of all the fixed signs. Maybe not. I mean, you could argue with me about that. But Taurus is fixed Earth. And so 15 degrees Taurus seems to be really unmoving. And that is duration. We just keep going. We do not allow ourselves to be distracted. And that seems to be a fortunate thing to do, but we have to go through the lines, and the second line moves, the third line moves, the fourth line moves, the fifth line moves, the sixth line moves. So, with the second line moving, there are certainly things we want to do. We're very keen to get going, and ideally, we would accept that our position is quite lowly. We're not really in a position to make great things happen unless we have some help, unless we're being instructed, and it might indicate that we feel that we're at a disadvantage, but not necessarily a major disadvantage, and perhaps we have to give deference to other people who may be in a somewhat sort of higher position than ourselves. Yet, if we do things on our own, and we may find we have to do things on our own, we're not always in a social situation, we just may find that in spite of our intentions, it's just difficult to make anything happen. And we've got the will, but is that enough? I mean, it's okay to try, but we just have to maybe accept that. And of course, if we find that things are not working, then we may find that we get a bit frustrated, or we think, oh, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And then we have moods. We can be happy one moment, unhappy the next moment, and is it really worth pursuing? And so we have our doubts, and and that could lead to a certain amount of indecision and even hopelessness. One of the images that the I Ching throws is of looking for something in a place where there is nothing. We can look as hard as we like with all the modern technology we have, and we are not going to find it. Maybe it's like looking for a Loch Ness monster. I mean, you can have sonar equipment, you can have submarines, you can have sophisticated detection systems. Doesn't matter how good your detection systems are, you're not going to find this Loch Ness monster. Well, sorry to be skeptical. I mean, I don't think most people believe in a Loch Ness monster, do they? I mean, maybe they do. I mean, sorry, maybe this is something very real to you, but that would be an example. Or just looking for something that just doesn't exist somewhere. It doesn't happen. And we are completely wasting our time. We're in the wrong area. I mean, this would happen with these sunken ships, like some aircraft carrier that sunk during the Second World War, or before they found the Titanic. You can be looking at an area of the ocean, and you can look really hard, and you're just not going to find it because it's not there. And so that is a possibility, but you could waste a lot of time, and because it's duration, you keep going, you keep looking for something, and it is a waste. Now then the fifth line moves. Now the fifth line is, you could say, is a very controversial line, and I'm just telling you how it is, and this is not my view of the fifth line. I mean, sorry, this is not my view of the world. I'm just telling you what the fifth line says. And the fifth line is somewhat sexist, to put it in a rather crude way. Fifth line, of course, is, it's the I Ching, it's a traditional oracle, and what it says is that perseverance, because perseverance is about duration, perseverance is okay for a woman, but it's not okay for a man. I mean, this is what the I Ching says. And it's kind of seeing the woman as someone who is passive. She keeps going, doing the same things, maybe whatever she has to do in the household. But the man is different. The man shouldn't persevere. The man should be full of ideas and full of action, and he shouldn't necessarily persist with something. If something comes up, he should respond to it. That's the right thing for a man to do, but it's not the right thing for a woman to do. Now, I'm just telling you that because that's what the I Ching is saying. I'm not saying that is, that is necessarily the way you should be seeing it. So, it's all about this duration and how you see this duration. And so, in terms of this top line, the fifth line. This is the fifth line is about it. So it may not be looking at it in terms of gender, but looking at it in terms of role. Are you the kind of person who was, I won't say born to be taking action, but at this particular moment, is your role to preserve things, to keep things going, or is your role to be able to, take the initiative and change things? And that is a complicated question, and that is something you have to ask. And then in the end, top line, it's just restlessness, just not being comfortable with the way things are. So although this hexagram is about duration, and it seems quite a mild hexagram, because there are so many moving lines, and these moving lines are not always particularly great, the overall picture is potentially of going all over the place, trying to do different things, not necessarily succeeding, and potentially wasting a lot of time. I'm afraid that's the upshot of it all. And we got 5 lines moving, so we move to a different hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram 20, which is contemplation. And that's probably the best way to be. So we've had all these dramas. It's all been a fuss about nothing. We probably haven't achieved very much. And finally, we just stop and we just take a deep breath and we just look at it and we sort of contemplate the situation. And we realize we don't really want to do anything else. And we're ready to take action again, perhaps another day, but not at the moment. And we can just perhaps watch other people wasting their time and watch other people have their dramas. But for us, that's not something we really want to do because, we've had enough. And now I want to look at things from the viewpoint of the astrology. And so here is, let's look at the chart for the astrological Beltane. If you, I don't know whether that's quite the right approach to seeing it, but so here is the moment that the sun moves. The sun is at 15 degrees Taurus, and so it is halfway between the equinox and the solstice, and that means it's 45 degrees. The sun is 45 degrees from the solstice point, 0 degrees Cancer. It's 45 degrees from the Aries point. And I'm speculating that it may be a moment of power. So according to this program, this takes place at 6:56 a.m. Westminster, London time, which is, in other words, 6:57, 3 minutes before 7 o'clock in the morning. And so the theory would be you look at the positions of the planets at that moment, and that might tell you something about the next 3 months between now and, is that right? Sorry, next 6 weeks between now and the solstice. Or it could be more short term. It may say something about the next week while this energy is at maximum power. I mean, I could even say something about the day. And so it is worth looking at that chart to see what the nature of that chart really is. And so the moon is trine Mercury, and so with the moon trine Mercury at the time of this astrological Beltane, it's going to be a time of communication. People have things to say, and it's a time when people who say things get attention. And we shouldn't be afraid of saying things which may be ever so slightly disruptive. After all, the moon is not just trine Mercury, but it's trine Chiron. And so moon trine Chiron, you could say, is saying things which make us stand out. We don't follow the crowd, and it's easy not to follow the crowd. And particularly when you've got moon trine Mercury. Moon trine Mercury is it's easy communication. It just happens. So that's one way of looking at this chart. I think that moon trine Mercury is probably one of the most important aspects there. And of course, we shouldn't forget that Uranus is getting closer to Algol. I mean, this Uranus getting close to Algol, of course, has nothing to do with this astrological Beltane. But I think we need to keep track of Uranus and how far it is from Algol. Just while we're on the subject. So Uranus is now 2 arc minutes from Algol. Uranus is really close to Algol. So any aspects to Uranus now really should be taken seriously. So turning to the 90-degree dial for this astrological Beltane, or we will see, because it's a 90-degree dial, a semi-square is seen as an opposition on a 90-degree dial. So there's the Aries point, there is the Sun. So they are going to share the same midpoints, and this is a time when the Aries point is on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint and the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. And so we've got these two outer planets which are configured by the Sun being 45 degrees. So these two pairs of outer planets which are really configured by the Sun and the Aries point coming together. And so Saturn, Neptune, it is a time of fear. We don't know what to do. We want to let go, but we can't let go. Uranus Pluto wants to break free. We've had enough. We want to do something. We want action, and we're not getting action, and we're frustrated. And that might be how it works. But things can happen, and I do think that this astrological Beltane, if that's the right way to describe it, is potentially quite dangerous, particularly because of that on the Saturn Neptune and the Uranus Pluto midpoint. I think that really does matter. It's also on the Moon Mars. It's aspecting the Moon Mars midpoint. So there is, you can see there's the Moon Mars, Uranus Pluto, and Saturn Neptune. So there is potentially a feeling of drama here and frustration, and people want things to happen and it's not happening. And we know with this Uranus Pluto, people want their freedom and they want things to change. And of course we've seen this in a very obvious way in the UK with the Reform Party having this incredible result in local elections on May the 1st. Of course, May the 1st was the true Beltane. I think May the 1st. It's kind of interesting that May the 1st was Beltane. You had these elections on in Britain, maybe there's some sort of symbolic and sort of ancient old forces are starting to rise, connecting with Britain's pagan past. I don't know. That's just maybe that's just a fantasy. So with this astrological Beltane, one does have to look at how it affects different parts of the world, and so if we do an astrocartography for it, parts of the world one absolutely might want to consider. So these, you see this green line, this red line here. These are all parts of the world where Mars is on the IC. So you can see Mars is on the IC through the British Isles, and Pluto is on the midheaven, well, in Dublin, and Mars is on the IC in London. So that's the British Isles might well be affected by this astrological Beltane. And turning to the Americas, there could be things going on. I'm going to go into detail and look at the precise chart. You see, there's all the positions of or everywhere where Uranus is on the IC, and that goes through the eastern United States. And Mars and Pluto is on the ascendant, and Mars is on the descendant. Going through, potentially going through Washington D.C. So it's not just London or Dublin one needs to consider. It's also Washington D.C. and what the government is going to be experiencing. Don't worry, I'll be looking at the precise chart in a moment. And then turning further east, there is India, and look at this line here. This is all the places where Mars is conjunct the ascendant, and so this goes right the way through India and actually goes through parts of Pakistan. So we already know that India is a bit of a trouble spot. So looking at those three areas, okay. Well, I should. Okay, let's. Okay, so here's the chart. So this is the chart set for London, and so set for London, Mars is quite close to the IC. It's not exactly on the IC, but this is probably telling us something about the aftermath of the local elections. And again, it's not a country that is comfortable with itself, and that Mars-Pluto opposition is quite close to the IC-MC aspect, the IC-MC axis. So the consequences of this election are probably going to be quite dramatic, and we can relocate that to Dublin. I think we'll see a similar picture in Dublin, the capital of Ireland. So if you reset that for Dublin, you see that Mars still is quite close to the IC, and you've got Pluto on the midheaven. So I think that both the UK and Ireland are going to be really stirred up by this astrological Beltane. Things are really moving. Of course, Beltane is a festival very much associated with the British Isles. There are other parts of the world, but it may be sort of stirring up sort of ancient archetypal forces, maybe, and it's not just the British Isles. Let's look at the picture for Washington D.C. So set for Washington, D.C., the capital of the US, Mars is exactly on the descendant, and Uranus is exactly on the IC. This is a dangerous chart, and I think Donald Trump is, maybe with foreign policy, is starting to lose the plot. I took the view with Donald Trump that the advantage of him winning the election would be that from a foreign policy perspective, he's more sort of America first. He's not into foreign involvements. But there are issues here. And the issue is, well, we know when Trump was inaugurated, Mars was on the IC. That was a warning. And now we've got this chart here with Uranus on the IC, Mars on the descendant, and things he's starting to lose control of things. And maybe that's, it's not just about, well, it is about Trump in a way, because Uranus is conjunct Algol. IC is conjunct Algol. And, we know that Trump has his Mars at 26 Taurus. And so he's got Uranus square his Mars. And Trump is the head of state. And he's the king. The king is the land and the land is the king. And so Uranus square his Mars, and we've got this. I think we have to be very concerned now about America and its foreign policy. And again, we shouldn't forget that Uranus soon enough is going to be in Gemini. Uranus in Gemini, there is this link between every time Uranus goes into Gemini, America finds itself at war. But it looks pretty bad, I think, from America's perspective. And it may not just be about, we think about Ukraine. I think that it seems that Trump finds it impossible to distance the US and the Ukrainian from what's going on in Ukraine. But there are lots of other places. It could be the Middle East. Of course, we've got India and Pakistan to worry about. And India and Pakistan is certainly something we need to look at. And so here is the astrological Beltane set for Islamabad, which is the capital of Pakistan. So if you sorry, that's the wrong one. Here we are. Okay, so yeah, set for Islamabad. So this is so May the 5th. So I've kept the London time, but this, if you set it for Islamabad, you have Mars on the ascendant, Pluto on the descendant. So Mars rising. This is quite aggressive. With Mars rising, there is an indication of conflict and war, because Islamabad, capital of Pakistan. So we've got Mars rising there, and if we do that for Delhi, again we've got Mars rising. So the Mars line the Mars on the ascendant line, it goes through India, but it really goes through Pakistan as well. So let me just show you that. So there's India. There's all the places where Mars is on the ascendant, and you see it goes through Delhi. And it goes right the way up, and sort of Islamabad is right up there. So it goes through, this Mars line goes through Delhi and Islamabad. So that indicates that things don't look good for peace on the Indian subcontinent, and this has to be sorted out. This has to be de-escalated, because I think it could get worse. At least looking at it from the perspective of this astrological Beltane. Of course, the astrological Beltane, doing a chart for when the Sun is at exactly 15 degrees Taurus, is not logically it's not going to be as powerful as the solstice or the equinox. And I do regularly do equinox and solstice charts. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes they seem to show dramatic things and then nothing happens. But given what we know about the world situation, I do think that there is some cause for concern with this horoscope for the the astrological Beltane when the sun is at exactly 15 degrees Taurus. So that's all I'm going to say about the subject. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.